Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Schifrin, and I will call the meeting to order of the Planning Board of April 14th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. We do not have anybody online, but still announce yourself as being here.
Say your
name.
Robert Tyrion.
Carol Hofstas.
Andrew Shepherd.
And Laura Schifrin. Lance has let us know that he'll be absent this evening. Would you join me in the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, for once I didn't have to have it.
I would like to thank all of our veterans and all of those that are serving now, both here and abroad, and also all of our first responders as well as their families. We owe them a debt of gratitude. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Town of Townsend YouTube channel. Is there anybody here recording? Is there anybody online recording?
Is Lance coming?
No. Okay, I do not have any additions or deletions this evening. And we are at 3 minutes before our appointed time. Do you have any?
In our 3 minutes, can we address the flowers and the chocolate? So those flowers and
Did you want
chocolate.
some?
No, those are for you, Lori.
Oh.
Procured by Beth, I believe, as a thank you for your over 10 years of service to the planning board. And those are far greater, yeah.
Chair. Thank you. These are beautiful.
Those are very pretty.
Very
different.
Yeah.
So we very much
Thank you.
appreciate you. We know the townspeople very much appreciate your service on the planning board, and we know that you'll continue to serve the town and that you'll be our liaison, but we're grateful for you and we'll miss you.
Thank you. It's very nice of you to say. Appreciate it. Thank you, Beth. And all of you. I can't say that I'm going to miss you because I'm still going to be your liaison. But you didn't expect that.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Okay, so well, we still have, if you have, why don't you, yeah, we have 2 minutes, so if you want to get that out of the way.
Go through some of them.
Yeah, I think that's the 3.3.
So 3.3 correspondence. This is a public notice from the Town of Townsend Planning Board. This is for the associate member vacancy. I believe, as we said the last meeting, this is the best board in all of the Town of Townsend, and we welcome anyone listening or present to join the board. Office of the Select Board. This is from the Town of Townsend. This is the meeting agenda for April 16th, 7 p.m. at the North Middlesex Regional High School Auditorium. This will be for the budget override, it looks like, public forum. So presentation and Q&A is okay.
Yeah.
So April 16th. And this looks like it's part of it. Yes.
Yeah, just windows.
Here we have. This is from FEMA. This was from FEMA to former board chair Shank. It says, I commend you for the efforts that have been put forth in implementing the floodplain management measures for the Town of Townsend, Massachusetts. To participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, as you implement these measures, I want to emphasize the following. The flood insurance study and flood insurance rate map have been completed for your community. The flood insurance study and flood insurance rate map will become effective on July 8th, 2025. The study and rate map's effective date, the Department of Homeland Security's Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, regional office is required to approve and legally enforce the floodplain management measures your community adopts in accordance with Title 44 Code of the Federal Regulations, Section 60.3D. I think that's just it.
Thank you. Okay, it's now 6:35 PM, and I would like to call the public hearing for 324 Main Street, site plan review special permit, major stormwater management permit. Could you introduce yourselves, please?
Robert Therian.
Carol Hofstas.
Andrew Shepherd.
Laura Schifrin. There is a sign-in sheet, and everybody who's here should be signing it, because you're part of the public hearing.
Have they signed in? There's a sign-in sheet.
Yes, for everybody in the audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just make sure that, of course, Kevin signed and didn't let anybody else sign, okay?
No, that's not quite all worked out. I think it's just gonna get passed down all the way.
Okay,
Here, yes.
it's part of the public hearing, you have to sign in. Okay, while you're doing that, I will read the public notice. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, and the Townsend zoning bylaws, Section 145-42, site plan review special permit, and Section 145-65, special permits, Townsend General Bylaw, Chapter 85, NPDES, Phase 2, stormwater management, and Chapter 175, Article 5, stormwater regulations, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 6:35 PM in the Selectmen's Chambers at Memorial Hall, 272 Main Street, to review a site plan review, special permit application, and a major stormwater management permit application received from 324 Main Street Partners LLC. The applicant is proposing to renovate an existing vacant gas station and convenience store located at 324 Main Street, map 50, block 17, lot 0. The project includes reconstruction of an existing building to include a convenience store, second floor office space, and a coffee shop with drive-through service. The project will also improve an existing pump station and canopy and provide 8 fueling positions, 24 marked parking spaces, and a new sign location are also proposed. The property is in the RA3 zoning district and the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. A public remote access link is as follows. That's if you were joining this evening. Parties wishing to speak in support of or in opposition to this application may do so at the hearing or in writing prior to the hearing. Copies of this application are available for review at Town Hall during business hours or emailing a request for digital copy to the Planning Board. Laura Schifrin, Chair of Townsend Planning Board. And it was published March 28th and April 4th, 2025, and CC'd all the abutters. So, having read the notice, now it would be the applicant's time to make the proposal.
Hi, Madam Chairman, thank you. For the record, Attorney Christopher Alphin from Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty. With me is our civil engineer, Dave, our architect, who I think is on the Zoom conference, Jay. And we have Kevin here, who's our contractor. We also have the principals of the proposed gas station. I thought tonight that we would just do a simple overview and go through the project plans and then go through questions after that. I do know that we're waiting for some more peer review comments, specifically civil peer review comments. So I think the expectation is that we're not going to close the hearing tonight, and we're going to have to continue until we get peer review comments about that. We also, at some point in time, may want to review traffic, and we weren't planning on reviewing traffic with our traffic engineer today. But that's going to be something that we can continue to. But I think for the purposes of tonight, we'd like to make an introduction, go through the civil plans, and get some feedback so that we can come back and answer and have peer review comments to finalize. We did get peer review comments on stormwater. There was nothing significant in the stormwater comments. We got them Friday, but Dave's such a great engineer that he's already ready to speak about those peer review comments and is happy to address those issues.
Okay.
So I think with that, if it's okay, if it pleases the board, I'll have Dave just go through the plan set with you.
Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Dave Farley. I'm from Wilcox and Barton. I am the senior civil engineer. I'm the engineer for this project. I'm responsible for the site design, the design of the fueling system and the stormwater system. So I'll start with just an overview of the site. So on the bottom of the plan here, this is Main Street, Route 119. In its current condition, there is an existing canopy at the front of the lot with a small abandoned gas station just behind it, and then a shed to the right of that. All of those structures are proposed to be demolished and removed from the site as part of this project, as well as all the existing asphalt, all of the existing concrete pads will all be removed from the site. The proposed development seeks to utilize the existing entrances onto the site, two-way entrances to provide not only traffic to the back for the drive-through, but also traffic through to the dispensing system. Two accesses are necessary because the vehicles that deliver fuel have to travel the opposite direction.
Can you see?
No, we can't.
Sorry,
Okay, so maybe get up against the wall or, so that everyone.
is that better?
There you go.
Thank you. All right. So moving into the site, we're proposing a new 4 dispenser, 8 fueling position station. There'll be a new canopy in this location. Here are the proposed underground storage tanks for the fuels. And then moving back, we've got parking on both sides, parking across the front of the building, and then the new 2-story building in this area here. Around behind the building will be a one-way drive-through area with order boards over here and a pickup window here. And this also includes a bypass lane. So anybody gets in line, decides they need to leave, they can still access it. It also provides access to all sides of the building for emergency services. Dumpster location would be in the back here. Easy access for vehicles to pick up the trash there. And then in the rear of the site, this is our proposed stormwater infiltration basin. The existing site slopes steeply down from about this point. So everything drains from the front property line to the back. So I'll just overview of the stormwater system. Stormwater is collected in a system of catch basins and pipes where it is conveyed to the rear of the site. The canopy is designed with its own internal drain, so it drains directly to the stormwater system and does not drain onto the fueling pad around the dispensers.
Explain that again.
So the canopy has an internal drain system that it's piped underground straight to the stormwater collection system.
I see.
Often what you'll see is the canopies discharge onto the concrete pad right at the bottom of the post. That is not the case here. So that stormwater doesn't commingle with anything in the fueling areas.
So separate containment system too?
It's just piped separately. Instead of discharging onto the concrete pad and then running across into the stormwater system, it is piped underground straight to it. So there's no commingling of the stormwater with anything around the dispensers.
Right. Is there a separate containment system for fuel spillage or anything?
I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So the pad is designed so that there's no stormwater runoff that comes onto the pad, referred to as run on.
Okay.
Okay. So there is no kind of wash of anything from there that enters the stormwater system.
Okay.
The edges of the pads are equipped with what we refer to as a positive limiting barrier. There are those grooves that are all in the edge, and those are sized to hold at a minimum 5 gallons of spill. In this case, it's more like 15 gallons because of the size of this pad. All right. So even stormwater that ends up here is routed around this pad. So to the maximum extent possible, there is no commingling of stormwater with any spills that might occur on the fueling pad. The tanks themselves are double wall tanks. The spill buckets are double wall spill buckets. The piping is all double wall piping. It's all monitored through an electronic monitoring system that can detect when there's leaks in the pipes, if there's leaks in the tanks, if there's leaks in the sumps, that would give the owner an alarm if something like that occurred. So once runoff is collected in the stormwater system, it's conveyed to this structure back here, which is a centrifugal separator. So it separates out coarse and medium sediments and any flowable materials. So hydrocarbons, gasoline, diesel, they float on water versus other things which may sink. And then it is discharged to the infiltration in the back. So we've taken steps to treat the stormwater as much as we can before it is discharged to that infiltration basin in the back, because we know we've got very sandy soils on site and we are proposing to infiltrate all of our runoff. Questions?
Is this in an aquifer district, you know?
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
I read it in public notice.
Which is why we took all the steps to make sure we weren't. The catch basins here and here are also equipped with hoods on their outlet. So they've got extra deep sumps and they've got hoods over the outlet, so that any floating material never leaves the catch basin. So this is set up to treat everything before it heads into the back. We are proposing to utilize the existing water service connection. The existing building has a 1-inch line. We're going to replace it from the curb stop back to the building, as recommended by the water department. And then there is no sewer in this area. So over here, there is a septic system proposed that is being reviewed by the Board of Health.
How many gallon septics is it?
I don't know. I didn't design the system.
Okay. And I understand it's gonna be a 2-story structure
Correct.
and it's mixed use?
It is, yeah, a convenience store, drive-through, and office space.
And just so the board is clear, this was applied to as a special permit for a pre-existing non-conforming use, and the ZBA granted the permit for the use.
Mhm.
So before the board, for this sake, is site plan review, it's not so much whether the use is allowed, the ZBA already made that determination.
No, I was trying to determine,
Yeah.
I get an idea of the septic capacity.
Yeah.
I can have that information for you, but there is a set of plans that's being reviewed by the Board of Health for that septic
I
system.
believe it was, I dug the test holes for that, Bob, and I'm not sure what it was, but I heard it was like the size of a 4-bedroom design.
I'm sorry?
The size of, larger than a 4-bedroom house type
Right.
septic system. Because you have the 2 offices upstairs for their use. That's mixed use, it's the offices.
Well,
for that.
understanding the function of the building will have a big impact on the septic.
Correct.
And so I don't know much about the building itself, whether there's gonna be food
It's a
prep or
fairly
anything
large-
like that.
fairly large septic system, I'm sure it's gonna have to have a grease trap.
It has,
It's
it
gonna have a grease
has a
trap,
grease
so-
trap, and it has a pre-treatment system
Oh,
to reduce the strength of the wastewater
Yeah.
before it's sent out to the fields.
okay.
The gas stations are considered kind of a high-strength wastewater system. So we have to knock that strength down before it can go out to the field for infiltration. This is the front elevation of the building.
Beth, do you know if Jay is online, our architect?
Yes, I'm here.
So, great, so our architect is online if you have any questions, or Jay, do you want to just briefly just describe the architectural design?
Yeah, so taking into account that we're in a residential area, we were trying to keep the building, have a residential feel with asphalt shingles, match the siding to similar what's around the area, and give it more of a residential feel than a commercial building. While it's still a gas station, it's still going to feel like a gas station. We feel this design fits more with the neighborhood area.
How many square feet is the building, do you know?
It's roughly 2,000 square feet per floor.
So these are becoming pretty popular, these gas station
Mhm.
convenience stores where you go, you fill up your tank and you get your iced coffee type places.
Right.
That's what this is gonna be. The office space, just to note, that's gonna be just for the office space for the people that are operating the gas station. It's not gonna be leased to a law firm or insurance company or anything like that. It's just gonna be for their own applicants' use.
Is it residential use up there?
No, no residential use.
But the parking was sized on the assumption that, based on the rules here, that convenience store, its employees, drive-through gas station, they got drive-through, its employees, and then the per square footage parking for the office space upstairs. So there's no assumption that there's common employees between it.
What about deliveries?
So deliveries to deliveries to the fuel tanks have to occur over the fuel tanks because it's a gravity drop from the tank truck down into the tanks. And the tanks are equipped with overfill protection valves, which means the trucks can't put too much fuel in. There's literally a flapper valve that closes and stops them from filling the tanks. Deliveries to the store will either occur in the front here or there's space over here for them to occur. There are no loading docks, anything like that on the site. Because deliveries for this type of use generally come in box trucks. But it is set up so that the semi truck that delivers fuel comes in here and then leaves that way.
Okay, great.
Yeah, my only comments are on the notes.
Yeah, I overheard you. I got some things to change.
Yeah, there were a few things to change.
Happens when you take things from one project to
I
another.
know, I know. So, just the date.
Yep.
Change the town.
Do you have anything to add to the, stormwater management peer review? So we got back, dated April 11th, peer review comments for stormwater. And I don't think that there's any major issues that we need to go over, Dave, is there?
The biggest change is that they're looking for an access 20%, an access path with a 20% grade maximum. So we worked on that and we achieved it by coming over the bank here, filling this slope out a little bit, and then you have access all the way around to there once you're over there. So it's easily get a truck or an excavator down there. If this infiltration basin needs to be refreshed, essentially, because they gotta get down there, take out the top layer of material, put new stone back.
Okay, that's the last referral comment that I read.
Mhm.
So after you're done with your presentation, I'll then do the
Very good.
public comments and the department comments.
The other comments, they're already in the plan. They just weren't clear on the drawings, so we'll be providing a response to comments with revised drawings.
Did they address any landscaping or,
This was just stormwater comments. We haven't seen any other peer review comments.
okay, and then in the stormwater plan, is there any erosion, what we have for erosion?
We have an erosion control plan in the set.
Yeah,
In this case, because of the way this site drains, it consists of silt fencing back here. And then as they work backwards in the site, filling it, they're gonna have to spread mulch, move that silt fence back as they go. And then this is the last thing that gets built, because you don't want to introduce construction stormwater to your
Right.
infiltration basin.
good.
Okay.
Just the one thing that I'll note is that in the ZBA decision, they did condition the project on certain conditions related to hours of operation, about having a boundary fence, but they wanted your input of what that boundary fence should look like, and different state laws that have to be complied with. So something you may just want to review, that those conditions are already on this project.
Right.
And you may want to review those conditions and make sure you're comfortable with those conditions and add or amend them how you see fit.
I know this is a stormwater hearing, but I didn't see any lighting addressed on this.
We did submit a lighting plan.
Yeah, we
I don't know
submitted a
if
lighting
Dave can speak to it. Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it, that's
Yeah.
all, yeah.
So as part of the package, we submitted a photometric plan, with lighting cut sheets. So there will be new pole lights around, the perimeter. There's one here, one there, two in the back, and then the rest are building mounted lights. All the lights are downcast LED cutoff lights.
Yeah.
To prevent spillage off the site.
Right,
So the photometric plan backs up the design that it's intended to meet, to light the site and not spill off to adjacent properties.
So you did get the, referral from the building commissioner? Because he addresses lighting.
Yes, I did see that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll be reading all of those.
Yeah.
And,
we supplied a plan and all the cut sheet full of lights that are proposed for the building.
Anything else? Okay, if you're, do you want to ask your question?
wondering if there's any diesel, pumps there,
Yes, yeah.
where are they gonna be?
They're all
Right
they're all right there. Yep. Because they're not designed for large trucks like semis or anything like that. They're designed around a, you know, a contractor's truck.
How much land is with that?
Right around 2 acres.
2 acre, I think, enough, just to touch on it, yeah, just touch on it.
We're creating about an acre of impervious cover over the lot, disturbing about 2/3 of the lot.
Well, I think, I don't know if the time brings that or not, but the land is right to the right of that, there's condos in there,
Mhm.
and she owns one of them. And, the septic and leach
Well,
field.
why don't we get to that when after I read your letter, okay? That has really nothing to do with this.
Right.
So if you're done with the stormwater part,
Perfect question.
thank you.
Thank you.
okay, thank you very much. So next would be the mandatory referrals, and I will be reading into the record. First is from the Board of Selectmen. And the comment there was, please ensure that the stormwater plan is independently reviewed to ensure that there are no, this is not my writing. I don't know what. Impacts on water quality for the abutters.
Or minimal. No or minimal impacts.
Yes, thank you. All right, that was Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health. A septic system must be designed, approved, and installed that is in compliance with 310 CMR 15,000, 15,000, and Towns of Board of Health regulations. The property is proposed to be served by town water. A food service permit must be obtained from the Board of Health. This will require submittal of an application, fees, and kitchen plans to review for compliance prior to starting the kitchen build out. And then the next is the zoning board of appeals. And on this, they wrote no comment. I already gave you the comments. And then the building commissioner, excuse me, conservation. Conservation had no comment. Highway department, I would like to assume any work being done within the state highway layout must receive approval from the district. All work requests shall be submitted through the state access permit system, SHAPS.
Well, there's a pre-existing driveway there anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the cutouts already there.
Sorry,
So we're upgrading the sidewalk out there, so
you got, new curbing?
new curbing, new paving, so, yeah.
Okay.
They're basically gonna fix that piece of sidewalk for the town that's decrepit and decayed
Okay.
that runs in front of the building.
All right, the next is the building commissioner. His comments, 1, lighting to comply with Town of Townsend bylaws 145-52. 2, occupancy, I'm assuming that the building will not be used for residential use. And 3, building is to be constructed in compliance with the building and fire code for the state of Massachusetts. And then water department. 1-inch water line must be copper in a gas station, and proper backflow devices are to be installed. And he said, good project. So those are the department. And then I need to read into the record the comments from Graves Engineering. 1 would be, this is dated April 11th. They received documents by an email on February 11th, 2025. Plans entitled 324 Main Street, Commercial Building and Fueling Station, 324 Main Street, Townsend, Mass. 01469, dated July 12th, 2024, prepared by Wilcox and Barton, Inc. For Umar Magal. Did I say that right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
I don't have to read it?
you certainly don't. I mean, you're welcome to, but you don't have to read every bit of correspondence you receive. You can just
Okay.
acknowledge the date of the letter
Okay,
and that it's part of the record, particularly since these comments haven't been responded to yet by the applicant. The applicant's indicated they're going to respond to them between now and the next meeting. If you're gonna have another letter like this that goes through all these comments and confirms that they've been
Okay.
addressed, you're probably gonna have a third letter from Mr. Walsh indicating that he's reviewed the applicant's responses and that they're acceptable. So
so I don't have to read the letter,
don't.
not even those in pink.
you don't.
Okay.
You're welcome to if you want to.
Does anybody want me to read it? Or are we good? Okay.
Are you reading from Dorothy Greek?
No, I will read that next,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Yep.
So thank you very much. Save a little bit of my voice. Okay, and then we received 1 letter from citizen who's in a butter. My name is Dorothy Greek. I own a condo at 328 Main Street. I owned a house beside Mr. Mike's in Townsend. I'm not sure, 80.
So I understand.
Oh, so I understand all the problems of owning a house beside a gas station. The smell of the gas, especially when they're getting deliveries of gas, which is usually okay. I have a substitute submission. All right. So I can just go to the 3rd. People throwing trash, which usually ends up in our yard, cigarette butts, scratch tickets, wrappers, loud motorcycles, gassing up all hours of the day and night. This will lower the value of our property. What are the hours of operation? We would like no lights coming into the condo area. We would like.
Sorry.
I'm not going to speak while you're speaking. We would like no lights coming into the condo area. We would like a stockade fence, 8 foot tall, on the border and shrubs on our side of the fence. Okay? All right, so that is into the record. Do you have any responses that you would like to make?
I would, as far as the abutters letter goes, we'll keep the conversation going. I know My client and the butter were just talking just before this hearing, and we'll keep the conversation going. We're always open to try to work things out with the butters. But I'd also note that some of the concerns of the butter, I think, were addressed in the ZBA's decision and part of the conditions that were incorporated into that decision. So that may want to be reviewed. Hours of operation are set, and a condition requiring a fence.
Which of these topics were addressed with the ZBA?
Hours of operation and a privacy fence along the easterly boundary of the property.
So if it would be helpful, I've got, and I know Council does, so I've got a copy of the ZBA's final decision, and I was a part of that process as well. So the ZBA discussed at length appropriate hours of operation, and so they limited the hours of operation Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then Saturdays and Sundays from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. So it starts 2 hours later in the morning, still goes until 8 p.m. They had a variety of other conditions. They addressed delivery hours. Delivery hours must coincide with the hours of operation. So they can't have deliveries at 4 in the morning or at 10 o'clock at night. They have to be during operational hours. They also say the applicant will construct and maintain a 6-foot high solid privacy fence. But I will note, because I think Ms. Greek,
And 6 feet, not high enough.
do you reside on the right side?
Yes.
Okay, and I think that the condition that addressed the fencing, the applicant will construct and maintain a 6-foot high solid privacy fence along the easterly boundary of the property. I think that's the other side.
Correct. Yeah, correct. If I might speak for a moment. Dottie, the gas station that was beside your property in the center of town is not anything similar to this. It's a half-acre land. It was on a half-acre lot with a smaller, with a good-sized building on that small footprint. What you have there is a piece of property that's would be almost 4 times the size of that parcel that was next to you. There's quite some distance to the property, although the excavation goes to the right side of the west side of the property. Your condo unit is over 100 feet. It's over 100 feet plus, I think with the parking lot, it's probably 125 feet. Now, if you own one on the left-hand side, it's still over 100 feet to the property line of dense vegetated area. You're not really comparing apples to apples, you might say. It's kind of like apples to oranges from what you own down there. Plus, there are hours of operation, John, if I'm not mistaken, are like 6 to midnight or 6 to 11. They were some 6 to midnight, I think. These folks are going to be open from 5 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. in the evening. And, I think there's quite a difference in the two business locations.
There is a difference, I agree, but how would you like to live beside a gas station with motorcycles and guys yelling because they're gassing up and cigarette butts and screaming?
I think a privacy fence there is one thing, but you got to remember that business was there for many years. I think that business was in operation for like 50 years.
Yeah, that is the oldest gas station.
Yeah, the condos went in after the gas station was there.
Well, that's been closed for how long? How many years has that been closed?
Well, the point being, I don't know. Obviously, anybody buying property in that area would have been aware there was a gas station there at one time, and the possibility of it coming back again. So what's being proposed now, it seems to be a major improvement over what was there, and even a higher standard of quality that we currently have with Mike's mobile station. I'm sorry, where did that come from?
I think it's something on there.
Harley, could we mute the
Audience.
that individual? Hartley, are you still present with us?
I don't know if that's her, maybe
Yeah,
it's here
Hartley.
tonight.
So whoever our TCAM guy is, do you think you could mute the that audience member?
Yeah, I just evicted him. I'm reporting him now.
All right, thanks so much.
So, I think in terms of what's the zoning board of appeals did here, was, very conscious of the abutters and particularly limiting the hours of service would be a major thing. And so, and the other part of it is, I don't know what else could be done to minimize any of these other situations. In other words, I mean, fuel does have a fume. I don't know how to solve that. So then it is going to be a new structure. And as being pointed out, what appears that the condo itself is 100 feet away from the property line.
It's gonna be all of that.
Yeah, but
Do we have a view of that anywhere?
We developed that site, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And, I know it was a great area of distance because they left a big area for a live septic system expansion,
Right.
which is over there. And another section that could still be put over there.
And the
There's a
parking is
little-
actually before the
The
condos.
parking is between the building and that, and when you were downtown, you literally had a fence and 5 feet to your building, I would say, or 10 feet, not much distance.
Well, it looks,
Over there, I think the closest point's gotta be up in excess of
well,
100
just
feet.
looking at the site plan, there appears to be almost 40 feet from the building to the property line, just my guessing at that.
Correct.
Right. And then there's going to be a 6-foot fence proposed as well.
Could we make that
Um,
8 feet, cause 6.
6 foot high.
6 foot high, yeah.
Well, if we put a berm up 2 feet, put a 6-foot fence on top of it.
Yeah, we'll
that would be
definitely
top out there.
consider,
We can work around that.
we can work that out on screening. We understand screening is important, so we'll definitely discuss making sure that we provide something as best we can for screening and present that. To make something that, try to make our
Okay, I
neighbors
have another
happy.
public hearing coming that we're late for right now. We
Okay.
have a posted public hearing. And as was stated when you first opened, that we would be continuing. And what date were you looking to continue to?
Well, it's up to the board on days that are available or dates that town council is available. Something that usually works.
Yeah, and the civil plan peer review has not begun yet. We're waiting for Jesper. So as soon as that's updated, he's ready to start, but he's online now. You might want to ask. I mean, I'm assuming any day now we'll be able to start.
Did you want to make a
Mr.
comment,
Walsh is online.
Mr. Walsh?
Good evening, everybody. No, I was just acknowledging my presence during this meeting. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to call your attention. But
That's okay. Well, how much time will you need?
we're gonna need 2 to 3 weeks once we get the authorization to proceed with the site plan review part of this. We're still awaiting the authorization to proceed.
And that should be probably this week. So I'm thinking
So 4 to 6 weeks,
be safe for 4 weeks.
4 weeks
At least.
at least.
Because remember, once you get the peer review back, then you gotta give the applicant's engineer an opportunity to review it and to comment on it, to modify the plans to address any
6
concerns.
weeks. Are you good with 6 weeks or do you want 8 weeks? What do you want?
I need like a week after I receive the comments.
So,
6 weeks.
So 6 or 7 weeks. I think that's fine. Yeah, we're fine. We're doing it that way. I just want to make sure we have clear direction of what we're gonna do at that hearing. We're gonna talk civil, peer review comments, and we'll have an opportunity to respond to that. We've addressed stormwater, but we'll formally give a response to the stormwater peer review. And then is there anything else that the board wants to discuss? We will consider and think about, screening on the westerly side of the property, but is there anything else that we should be considering? Do you have any other comments for us so that we're ready next time?
I do not.
Okay.
What are you thinking, Carol?
Well, I would think we probably need at least 7 weeks.
On June 9th? At this one? We just did.
Okay.
We did the public comment.
Okay, there's only one comment.
Yeah. So June 9th,
June 9th is done.
okay, entertain a motion to continue this public
Can I
hearing.
just say something so we can wrap up our concerns at this meeting? With regard to the odor of gasoline being moved, this system and all systems now in Massachusetts are equipped with referred to as a stage 1 vapor recovery. So when the fuel is dropped down into the tanks, the truck is also connected to the top of the tank in the location, so that gasoline vapor is pushed back into the truck. So it no longer just gets pushed out into the air. And I've been around a gas station when they do it wrong and it gets out in the air, it's
And
terrible.
They won't do that at night, in the middle of the night.
They won't do it, and you should never have that smell, because all that vapor
See,
is
the
back into the
system
truck.
that was down at your place, Donnie, down here, was an old style system. This is completely different.
Now that is very latest system, because few tanker have that, which is vape come, they take it back in the tank and deliver gas. When they dump the gas, vape is coming up and they take it back.
Okay.
Not in air for pollution, no
Right.
way.
Okay, appreciate that.
That's good.
Just close. I'd like a motion to continue the public hearing for 324 Main Street to June 9th at 6:45 PM.
Yeah.
Will we get a
Yeah.
notice? Will we get a notice in the mail?
No.
We just have to know.
We'll just know that now that's when it is,
Write that down.
because it's a continuance of a public hearing that's already been posted. And once the agenda is posted, it'll be on that agenda for June 9th. Okay?
I second.
There's a first and a second. Any more discussion? No, hearing none. Vote.
Carol Hoff says yes.
Robert Theron, yes.
And Laura Schiffern, yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Now we're at, public hearing for 7:10 PM. And 7:19 PM.
Nice to see you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
As you mentioned that, because we have two gas stations, Mr. Mike and Anarjina,
Right.
and we will make from 0 to up that latest, everything, every equipment, everything is the latest.
Yes.
You will see that is a fantastic location in the town.
Right. I think it's gonna be a
Yeah.
great project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank
It'll
you.
be a nice addition.
Your jacket?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here we are at now 7:19 PM, and I would like to call the public hearing for proposed zoning bylaw amendments. Board members, introduce yourselves.
Carol Hoff says present.
Robert Theron, President.
Andrew Shepherd.
And Laura Schiffern present. There is a public sign-in sheet, I believe. I'm sure that I'm here to sign it. And I will read the public the legal notice.
Oh, you don't have to?
I don't have to? I've always told I had to.
You virtually don't have to read anything if you don't want to. A lot of boards will routinely say, "Took a motion to waive the reading," and there'll be a second and they'll waive the entire reading. So it's always a
All
choice.
these years and I never knew that.
Always a choice.
Well, thanks. So you have,
Part of my gift for leaving.
so you have to make a motion to not read.
So I always suggest that when it's something that is statutory, like the actual reading of the hearing notice itself, if it's something like that letter from Hayes Engineering or from Grace Engineering,
Yes, yeah.
you don't need to motion to waive, you just don't read. But if it's something like the introductory public hearing notice, what I would suggest is make a motion to waive, or entertain a motion to waive, or just read it, it's your choice. Different boards do it different ways.
I will do whatever the board likes. So if you want me to read it, I will, and if you don't, make a motion to waive the reading of the legal notice.
Move to waive the reading of the legal notice.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Vote.
Tara Hofstas, yes.
Barbara here.
And Shepherd, yes.
Laura Schifrin, yes. Okay, thank you so much. Let's see. So we have the proposed zoning bylaw amendments, which first is the May 6th. This is for the warrant article.
Yeah, I think there's three separate zoning amendments that are proposed. There's a map amendment.
Okay, here we go. These are all for May 6th, 2025 Townsend annual meeting. 145-45 floodplain district, proposed floodplain district 145-145 for annual town meeting 25. EF redlined and anointed. We didn't want me to do that. All of a sudden I was like getting religious here. All right. And Townsend zoning map floodplain district. And the 145-54 age restricted development. Now, do I have to read all those or can I go into the referral comments? I don't have to read all these that are being posted. Okay.
Are we going on?
Thank you very much.
We're doing the floodplain district and then the age draft.
Age restricted.
Oh, yeah, the age restricted draft. I got somewhere in here.
Well, so I'm just going to announce that we received no comment from the Board of Selectmen, no comment from Historic District Commission, no comment from Conservation Commission, and no comment from the Board of Health.
The age, the response, the age restricted.
So anybody want to say anything?
I mean, I'm happy to speak to them because I reviewed them all, but I wasn't the principal author of any of them, but.
Okay.
But I've reviewed, so the floodplain overlay district, and that you can feel free to jump in if I say anything that's inconsistent with what you know to be true, but my understanding with the floodplain overlay district is that Townsend is doing what most communities have done within the past 2 or 3 months, which is the federal government adopted new flood insurance rate maps. They are requiring communities to accept those rate maps because they're a newer version than what last issued 10 years ago. If you choose not to adopt those rate maps, then you drop out of their flood insurance program and your residents can no longer acquire flood insurance. And so they're requiring an adoption of new maps, and they've also slightly modified, my word is slightly, maybe more substantially than I've seen in the past, modified some of their standards. And so what you're doing here is you're adopting a new floodplain overlay district bylaw that introduces some new definitions, addresses the applicability of of floodplain rules to subdivisions, addresses things like data acquisition concerning base flood elevations and who you're required to notify, talks about the process for variances, things of that sort. I reviewed this, I compared it against the guidance that's been received from the federal government. I've reviewed, this might have been the sixth or seventh one I've reviewed within the past 2 or 3 months. They all sort of look the same because it's following the same model bylaw that's been circulated. So I don't have any issue with it. So that's the floodplain overlay district. And then together with that, even though this district incorporates by reference the federal flood insurance rate maps, there's also this zoning map you've got, where you've got the actual floodplain, the 2024 maps that have been overlaid in this red color, this crosshatch red color, showing where that floodplain lies within the town of Townsend. So this will be a second zoning amendment, because you'll be adopting this map and including it as an attachment to your bylaw. So that's the first two. And then the third. Oh, sure.
The one change that was made in the proposed bylaw, which is different from the existing floodplain district, is the existing ZBA is the SPGA, and now it's going to be the planning board. Okay, so it's a special permit from the planning board. Okay, that's the biggest change for Townsend.
Lucky.
Okay, next.
So then we have the age restricted development bylaw.
Yep.
And you all ought to know this by heart at this point, because we've been through this. This is our third or fourth go around, right?
Yeah.
So, so I know this one
But
well.
now it's perfect.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So I know this one well too, because it was 3 years ago that I think it was Lori and Veronica had come to me and with this proposal to make potential amendments to the age restricted development bylaw. One of which was to reduce the minimum acreage from 2 acres to 1 acre. Another of which was to include a broader waiver provision that gave the planning board some greater flexibility in waiving some of the requirements here to allow for age restricted development to happen. And as you know, that was, well, as you may not know, that was contemplated in 2022, but never ultimately brought to town meeting. This board held a public hearing at the time, but then it was never advanced to town meeting. Fast forward to 2024, or was it 24 or 25? A few months ago.
I think it was the January
Might have been
25. Yeah.
So fast forward to January 25, you brought this forward, and it made it to town meeting floor, and then we lost a quorum. So no action was taken on it. But in the course of discussion on town meeting floor, a number of individuals questioned the obligatory nature of the age restriction. They said, is this really an age restricted development bylaw? Because how do we know for certain it's age restricted? And my answer at that time was the same answer I've given all of you previously, which is it's not a mandatory requirement. In fact, we had that discussion in 2021 when I reviewed this originally when the town adopted it. And I asked the question at that time, do you want it to be obligatory? And the planning board then, I don't think many of you or you were on the board, I'm not sure anybody else was. Carol, you might have been.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I asked the question at the time and the answer was, no, we don't want it to be obligatory. Well, fast forward to 2025, and my sense is that maybe you do want it to be obligatory.
Yeah.
So I was asked by Lori 2 months ago to put together some language that would introduce an obligatory requirement. So what I've got here is this new, on page 3, this new subsection F that is called age restriction.
Okay.
Which is really not new.
Wait, we leaped from the flood stuff to this, and on the flood by changes, I just need to feel confident that the planning board has some level of being able to mediate or control some of this stuff without it. Is that being provided for?
So I mean, I can give you my impressions of the bylaw, but I didn't draft the bylaw. I just reviewed it to be sure it complied with the law.
Right.
The way the bylaw is structured, it requires a special permit. The town requires, I'm just reading from it, the town requires a special permit for all proposed construction or other development in the floodplain overlay district, including new construction, changes to existing buildings, placement of manufactured homes, placement of agricultural facilities, fences, sheds, storage facilities, or drilling, mining, paving, and any other development that might increase flooding or adversely impact flood risks to other properties.
And it's planning board. It's planning board.
Right.
So anybody that wants to do any of those things that I just mentioned in any of the areas that are
Special
shaded red on the
Right.
plan now require a special permit from your board.
Okay. So in dealing with any prospective special permit applications, how much latitude would a planning board have? I mean, just,
So it's a special permit, it's not site plan review, and I know that in Townsend, you call your site plan review a site plan special permit, just to add some additional confusion.
right,
And I know we're trying to work away from that, and you've been working with MRPC to adopt, and you have now adopted a true site plan review process for ADUs, and we've talked about shifting a lot of the site plan review into that non-discretionary category. This would be a true discretionary special permit. So to your question, how much discretion do you have? You have a fair amount.
okay,
You're going to apply the same special permit standards that you currently have in your bylaw, where you look through, okay, are the beneficial impacts of this proposal, do they outweigh the potential detriments?
I see,
That you look at traffic and pedestrian safety, you look at consistency with neighborhood character, you look at fiscal impact, you look at availability of utilities, you go through that checklist the same way you otherwise would. But your focus is really going to be on damage to the floodplain, right? Because that's what's triggering the site plan is, okay,
Right.
how is this going to harm or potentially harm the floodplain?
Right.
If you determine that it's not going to, you'll grant the permit, and if you determine that it will,
right,
you'll deny the permit, and you'll have the ability to engage an engineer to look at it and say, this will be okay, no problem, or no, we have concerns and we recommend that you deny or you condition your approval.
I noticed there's no size limitation on any of these things. You mentioned a shed, so we can envision a large structure or a very small one. And I don't know if we want to burden the planning board with somebody that's trying to build a 6x8
Well,
shed.
if it's in the floodplain, they have to get a special permit.
So I'll answer it simply, you don't have a choice.
Okay,
The federal government has said,
all
they
right,
won't do anything.
that's what
They gotta
Yeah.
I wanted to be clear on all this stuff.
Now you're clear.
I'm clear.
Yeah, it's yours anyway.
All right, Thank
Okay,
you.
back to the age restriction.
Right, so back to the age restriction, so you can see the bold language on the third page of the handout. That's correct.
Mhm.
So this now says that all dwelling units that are constructed within an age restricted development are intended for and shall be restricted to occupancy by households with at least one person who is 55 years of age or older, and shall be operated accordingly pursuant to and except as may be exempted by, and then I referenced state statute, general laws, chapter 151B. I referenced a section of the United States Code, 42 USC, section 3601, and the subsequent sections. And then I referenced the federal regulation, which is the 24 CFR 100.300 to 100.308. The reason I incorporated all those references there is because the only other way to do it, and some communities have attempted to do this, but I advise against it. When you read, so chapter 151B of Mass General Laws is about a page long. 42 USC 3601 and 3602 and 3603 is about 10 pages long. 24 CFR 100.300 to 100.308 is about another 10, 12 pages long. And they talk about all the details about circumstances where, well, it's only 80% of the units that need to be age restricted. What happens if you have an individual who's 55 or older and they're living with somebody, let's say that they're married to somebody who's 45, and then the 55 or 56 or 57-year-old dies.
Right.
What happens? So there's all these rules about what happens if you've got somebody who's disabled. Can they circumvent this? What if you've got a caretaker who's living in the kid? There's it's very complicated when you delve into the world of Housing for Older Persons Act, which is the law that sort of governs all this at the federal level. So rather than try to address all those nuances, all I've said is the rule in Townsend, assuming that this gets adopted at town meeting, is going to be all dwelling units constructed within the age restricted development have to be restricted to occupancy by at least one person who's 55 years of age or older. That's consistent with the state and federal standard. And then I've incorporated these statutory references and these code references to allow for that flexibility consistent with federal law, because frankly, whether you want to allow that flexibility or not, it exists at the federal level. You could get more stringent. I've seen some communities, because you have the ability, the federal law is what we call a floor and not a ceiling. It provides the baseline of protection. You can go further. I've seen some communities say 100% of the units have to be age restricted. We don't even want to allow for the deviation that the federal rules allow for, where as long as 80% are age restricted, and the other 20% could have individuals that continue to reside there that are under the age of 55. You could get more stringent, but this is what I tend to see adopted more often than not, is something simpler, easier to administer, and referencing and incorporating by reference the state and federal standards with respect to age-restricted development.
Because if somebody wanted to, they could object and ask for the federal standard to our bylaw.
Well, I mean, it's a little more complicated than that. So nobody could really object and say we want a different standard. If you
No, I
had,
meant if it happened, if the situation happened.
yeah, they couldn't. There would be, if you had a bylaw that was more stringent, they would have to comply with your more stringent bylaw. But there, I think, and this is just sort of my color commentary, I think that the federal standard exists for a reason, because it gets, you know, what happens if you've got a 20-unit development? And so this says that the federal law essentially says 80% of the units have to be age restricted. So that provides some flexibility. What if you got a vacant unit and that the unit remains vacant for 6-9 months? Is that whole project now out of compliance with your bylaw if your bylaw requires 100%? What about if you've got 5 units that are vacant? Well, now it's out of compliance with the federal law that says 80%. And so again, this is something that the Housing for Older Persons Act and the accompanying state regulations, the state statute address in terms of, well, how long can a unit remain vacant? Until such time when you start counting that unit as essentially being one of the units in the development that is non-compliant because it's not occupied by an individual that's 55 years of age or older. So I'm not prepared to say somebody could object and say, no, we want the federal standard. They don't get to pick and choose. But I think that if you adopt a more stringent standard, you have to be prepared to enforce that more stringent standard.
So a unit, so the 55-year-old dies and his 45-year-old wife is still living there. Does she get kicked out? I mean, how does that work?
What's the enforcement part
I
of
would
this?
think not.
No,
I don't think you would go for it though. I mean, would it be the development? Because the development usually has rules and regulations, and most of them that I've seen age restrictive actually have the state's, all the state guidelines are part of their documents.
They are, but to your point, the answer is yes. If you've got a 48-year-old residing with a 58-year-old and the 58-year-old passes away, and this is a unit that's for sale that they own, the federal standards require a sale of that unit. There can be a forced sale of the unit.
So they can force you to sell
They
it.
absolutely can. That's the concept behind it.
Okay.
But they also know that ahead of time.
They do. It's all restrictions
Because
of
it's part of
record.
the documents you sign.
Okay.
But you are correct. I mean, typically what we see is these developments have either condominium associations or homeowners associations, and those associations will incorporate the language of the state and federal code and regulations into their declaration of trust, master deed, whatever it might be for the development.
And that's all of them. All the ones that I've seen so far, 55 and over, they're 1 or 2 bedroom. And they all go by those guidelines.
Yeah.
And most of them, honestly, most of them are 55 and over.
Well, yeah, because
the people moving in there.
When I got divorced, they were building brand new 55 and over condos right where I lived, and I was only 50, wasn't 55, I was 54 or something. And I went to look at them and they said, oh no, you can't buy one here. You have to be 55. But if you find somebody older that will buy it for you, you can,
But I mean, they've got to be careful in making
Yeah,
representations.
I don't know.
If it was somebody older you found that you were going to live with, that'd be great. But if you just found them and they were going to buy it and let you live there without them occupying it, the standard isn't 80% of the units have to be owned by somebody 55. They have to be occupied by somebody 55.
Yeah, well, that's not what they told me. They just said I had to have somebody buy it.
Okay.
But anyways,
Okay. So.
okay.
So the only other piece to this, I didn't read the last sentence, is just that I've required here that there would be a restriction in a form that's acceptable to the planning board that would be recorded in the chain of title to the property, because otherwise you need to deed restrict these units. It's not enough to have in my opinion, to have a decision of the board that grants the special permit. And that's fairly routine as well. I did some, I've done a few of these, but I went back to look because the law is constantly evolving. I looked at some recent decisions of the Attorney General reviewing bylaws like this that were adopted in different communities. And I don't think there'll be an issue with something like this passing muster, assuming it gets through town meeting once it goes to the AG's office.
Because so far we just have the 3-unit one and proposal of 6.
Did I sell that middle unit finally?
Yes,
I thought I saw a sold sign.
yes.
Holy
And
cow.
somebody from town bought it.
Wow, good for them. I hope they got a good
Cash
price.
after selling their house.
Oh.
I meant to tell you.
Well,
I just found it out. But it is somebody from Townsend that bought the middle unit.
They did?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And I knew, see the smile on his face. I knew you'd be happy.
All right, that's great news.
So, but that is what we were looking to get. I think, I myself must have been sleeping at some point before the January 28th meeting, because I thought whenever we talked, it was 55 and over, and then the 55 and over was not in the bylaw.
Yeah, it's never been in the bylaw.
Okay, but now it is.
okay.
Well, will be.
Hopefully,
It will be.
hopefully we
Yeah,
will
voted.
finally get this through.
I
Any other comments?
think the highlighted bold language seems to take care of everything we need to address on that. Is there opportunity to discuss any other parts of this bylaw at this point?
Yeah, because it's the whole thing.
One of the things that comes to mind, if you look at applicability, okay, down to item 2, an age-restricted development is intended for people of 55 or less. Such building and site improvements in an age-restricted development shall provide for guest parking, public meeting areas, and universal design in accordance with the provisions of this section. We've recently had some of these. And we never saw how a public meeting requirement was achieved. Public meeting areas. So that's one concern I had. And then the other concern is, in our recent review of these applicants, we pretty much have dealt with 1-story ground level type structures. There's nothing in this bylaw that addresses multi-level buildings. In other words, one that would have an elevator and things like that. And then you go back to the section 8 where we just discussed. At the very bottom, item 2, it says outdoor facilities such as walkways, gardens, and recreation areas shall be designed for universal access, which is obviously an obvious statement. But what I question with that is, but they're not specifically required. You see that? In other words, it's alluding to the standards for those things, but not requiring them to be done or provided. And that's, I think, is something we should think about and discuss. So in the context of the recent ones we've approved, I've observed a couple of things. The last one that we approved, the last 2 that we approved, there was no open meeting public space for a meeting group, which didn't appear to be necessary in those two projects.
They're small.
Right.
They're small.
But here, so should that be a requirement or not, A? And then two, if we have an applicant that comes in with a multi-storied unit, I really feel that in all multi-storied buildings, as a general rule, regardless of being age restricted or not, those individual units should have access to an outdoor space directly to their unit. So if we're talking a multi-story unit, that would imply some kind of a deck or a balcony, okay? And that is a product of, you know, in my world, we deal with buildings based on a lot of sciences, okay, in order to come up with a design recommendation. And so those involve sociology, psychology, physics, engineering, construction, economies, and things like that. So in planning a project, all those sciences have a relevant point, and the architect can't satisfy all of them, but makes a reasonable application to include those elements as much as realistic in the project. So when we talk about a multifamily building, for example, we're putting a very high density in a very concentrated area with limited access to the outdoors. And so it does tend to generate, when you have domestic issues going on in any specific unit, there is no pressure relief valve without getting in an elevator and going outside or whatever. So we're talking about the social aspects of this type of housing. And and that applies to multi-story to multi-unit buildings.
Madam Chair, I just want to be sure that we're not going too far afield here. I know that the chair indicated that the entire bylaw could be discussed. It really can't, right? So I just reviewed the public hearing notice for tonight's public hearing. The only thing that you've noticed that you're going to be discussing tonight are 3 amendments to the age restricted development bylaw. Reducing the acreage.
Like changing of numbers and.
Yeah, but those are ministerial. So 3 substantive edits. Reducing the acreage, making the age restriction mandatory, and adding a waiver provision. So I'm not discouraging you from discussing this. If you want to have future discussions about gutting this bylaw and rewriting it and adding in concepts about access to outdoor space, that's fine.
My frustration is I've been trying to communicate this for many months, and it's still not here.
I want to talk about that, but let's finish with this and the public hearing part. And I'm happy to answer, because I want to talk about what has gone on in town and point out some developments and what happened and what didn't happen. So if you would let me do that.
Well, excuse me, I'm not trying to be obstructive at all, or
no, but I just
absorb
want to finish
people's
with the
time.
public hearing.
It's just that this is going before a town meeting, and it's going to become law.
Yeah, but we can't change anything what's already changed here. For right now, this is the verbiage that's being presented, and this is what the public hearing was about.
Okay.
Okay. Is that right?
Right, I mean, I understand Robert's point, but it's not that it's going before town meeting, it's going to become law. This is the law. This went before town meeting 5 years ago, it's 5.5 years ago, and became the law.
Right.
All that's being proposed now, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be more proposed, it's up to you. All that's being proposed now is a broader waiver provision, a mandatory restriction, and reducing the acreage from 2 acres to 1 acre. If you want to make additional changes, you can do that. You just can't do it as part of this hearing because it wasn't advertised.
I got it.
That's all.
All right, thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry I wasn't clearer. So if there's no other business in yes, ma'am?
Hi, sorry. I wasn't sure at what point I could speak.
Say your name.
My name is Sandra Lord. I was just wondering about, I think it's the third portion of it with the acreage reduction. And I'm finding it a real sticking point. I'm pretty new to town goings on, and I'm just looking at this town acreage reduction. My husband was on the Board of Health in the 90s, and he has we've been talking about this kind of stuff, and I couldn't be here tonight, but I have the same concern about the acreage. And it was, I think it was talked about another time here.
A number of times.
Yeah, a number of times.
Talked about the acreage a number of times.
And the concern is, and I was told, a tight tank would be the resolution for the septic concerns. My husband's like,
no.
What?
Whoever said that, nobody would ever call a tight tank a resolution.
Well,
tight tank is like
there
the
was
kiss of
discussion
death
here.
to a property.
when I was here, someone mentioned a tight tank, because I had mentioned concerns about the septic before. And my husband knows all about that stuff because he's on the Board of Health. And he said that it's, there's a real concern for septic. If you gotta look down the road at what can happen. And, he said it's gonna be a really ugly mess if it's not, taken care of properly, and you have to have room for expansion for septics. If they fail, it's not actually a matter of if, it's a matter of when I think they fail. And you're gonna have a bunch of places really close together, so what do we get there? My husband
So
said, "Oh, it's
right
gonna be a big
now,
mess."
what we have in place is conservation, Board of Health, and the water department, and the building commissioner. And if all of those departments are okay with the proposed septic plan, then we should allow that owner to build. We have our checks and balances in place so that something isn't permitted that shouldn't be permitted. So it doesn't matter. You could have all those things in a half-acre lot and then they should be able to build. Or you could have a 5-acre lot and may not be able to build because there's so much wetlands, or conservation says no, or the septic.
No, I
it's
get that.
ledge.
I get that.
Okay, so we're the planning.
Right.
So planning should allow development, okay? But there's checks and balances to what the development can be by other departments.
Well, my concern about this, and I did hear the tight tank discussed here when I was here, one of the meetings. I didn't pull out of thin air. But anyways.
But it's not a resolution.
No, but that's that was a suggestion, right? When I made I was concerned then about the closeness of each building, about the septic. And someone said, oh, a tight tank will take care of that. And it was discussed here really briefly. I mean, I don't know what meeting it was at, but I mean, I'm sure if I did a little research.
It's not a good way to go.
No, it's not a good way to go. And it definitely is not. My concern still is, I mean, if all the other factors are in place, you're still looking at down the line, they're all very close together and there's no room for expansion. Who's gonna oversee this for like age restricted development? Like the running of it? Is it gonna be like, oh no, actually, are people gonna own their own units, or is it gonna be run by people? I mean,
all the ones we've approved are condominiums, so they're sold units. So there's an association for each one.
But they can be either. There's nothing in the bylaw that requires that.
Right.
They can be either. The bylaw doesn't prescribe them.
It's just a building type. It's not an ownership.
so what happens down the line that it's time to be pumped and the person doesn't get it pumped, the septic? And it could be, I mean, as you get older, I mean, you have different needs and stuff, and I can't particularly picture every single person as they're getting older and remember that it's time for the septic to be pumped. You know, if someone gets ill, they're not gonna remember. And different factors come up and it doesn't get pumped. What happens is there's a bunch of people that don't get it pumped.
Is it not the association does that?
Yeah.
Is that?
It just,
When you own the condo, it's associated. See, I know nothing about this, one asking.
well, if you own any house, any property,
Hmm.
you have to make sure that your septic gets
No,
pumped.
I get that, yep.
And it
But
usually
20 or 80
surfaces when there's a problem. Okay, so the owner has to deal with the septic problem. It involves the Board of Health. So if there are multiple owners or multiple tenants, it's the same scenario as if you owned it privately, whether it's an association or not. So,
I think it's hard to answer the question hypothetically because we don't know, it may differ from project to project.
Mhm.
You may have a project that is an ownership project with a homeowners association. You may
Okay,
have a project that is an ownership project without a homeowners association, but simply a very loose declaration in which every owner has an interest in the common land on which there might be a common septic. Maybe for one project, you don't have a common septic. Maybe it's a small project, it's only 3 units on 1 acre, and they have individual septic systems. Maybe you have a project that's not a for sale project, it's a rental project, and you have a single owner that is leasing out the units, renting the units, and then that owner is responsible. So every situation is going to be different.
okay, that's fair enough.
You know, the planning board isn't gonna have the authority planning board has no authority over septic. It's just not within the purview of the planning board. So the planning board is never gonna have the authority to enforce the installation of the septic system, the type of septic system, the maintenance of the septic system, failed septic system, that's all within the purview of the Board of Health.
Right, no, I get that too.
Right.
My concern is the changing of the verbiage to 1 acre. And, okay, let's go forward a little further. If someone's septic fails, where's the room gonna be for expansion? On a 1 acre lot? Because you see how big they are. I mean, it's changed over the years of what they have to do to redo septics. I mean, you see big mounds. So what's gonna happen when you reduce it to 1 acre?
Okay, so I have a recent one that was on 5 acres of land with lots of, wetlands. Title V failed. New septic has to go in.
Right.
There was no expansion. They had to remove everything from the original system because that was the best place to put a septic system and install a new one. And it's all done through the Board of Health. So it doesn't, so the 1 acre can be all sandy soil and you can, that may never be a problem. But you get 5 acres in wetlands and you have problems. Or up on Wallace Hill or Bayberry Hill Road or any of the hills in town that are loaded with ledge. They could have 10-acre parcel and have a failed system. So the acreage, this is what I was trying to say in the beginning. The acreage, if it's sandy soil and town water, that's like perfect, okay? You can do that on 1/4 acre lots. So 1 acre is really too big for what you need for that. And there's the departments that will take care of issuing the permits that need to be issued. But you can have a 10-acre parcel and not be able to build one thing on it. And there's many of those in town. Hope that answers your question.
Well, gives me a good idea. I just have a lingering concern. I just feel like years ago, things were changed with the acreage for a reason. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they wanted to stop growth.
Is that what it was?
And
Really?
they did. And we had a moratorium for 2 years. And then after the 2 years of 0 building, they allowed only 12 permits a year. It was definitely to stop growth.
Huh.
Well, now we have 1,000 less people than what we had when we did that. And now we're looking to try to have some development on feasible lots. Feasible. Only ones that would be good to build on.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So many years ago, it sounds like someone wants to stop the building growth in Townsend. Is
Oh,
that
they
what you're
did.
saying?
They did. They did.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for coming. Can we close this public hearing?
Well, actually, someone online.
Do we have to act on this revision change?
Who's got a hand up?
I see CK online. I don't know who CK is.
I don't see it.
I'm, Cindy King has her hand up.
Oh, Cindy, okay.
Hi, and I
Go
just
ahead.
want to, because Sandra Lord's there, I'm gonna hit personal and say, I'm not her sister. There's two Cindy Kings. I'm the other Cindy King that most of you know well. Anyway, I want to speak out in support of the zoning changes you're making. Particularly, I want to counter appropriately counter the 1 acre zoning issue. I'm in support of that. I mean, I know it is not on the agenda, but I'm in support of 1 acre zoning from town line to town line. I think the whole town should have 1 acre zoning allowed wherever it's feasible, not just an age restricted. I live in the historic district in West Townsend, and I think I can speak for most of the historic districts in the town from most of Main Street, that most of our properties are 1/4 acre, maybe 1/2 acre. Many of the properties in these historic districts are multi-family. My house was a 2-family. I recently converted it to a 1. But as it stands on a 1/4 acre, this house has I've been living here over 40 years. No issues with the septic. I have to have it pumped now and then. That's a pain in the neck, but that's maintenance. And then every property in Townsend has to take care of that. Under our current zoning laws, despite any conversations I might have to have with Historic District Commission, I could put an ADU in my backyard if I wanted to. So I can even add property, and my septic tank is for a multifamily dwelling, so it's fine. And I'm speaking for most of these properties have no issues. I've not heard any serious concerns with any inability to handle any issues with septic that has come up on these small postage stamp. I have a 1/4 acre. I think it's a big yard. I grew up in a city. I didn't have this big of a yard. So 1/4 acre is a lot of land for me. And there's plenty of room. I could put another septic tank in there if I wanted to. I could put it on the other side of my house if I wanted to. And thinking of smaller properties, when I was looking at some of the other zoning things coming up down the pike here, that McNabb's, that's a 4-unit dwelling. That's on less than 1/4 acre. What do they do if the septic goes down? I mean, these are properties that have been there for 200 years, 100 years. They're fine. There's no issue going to even less than 1 acre on most of our properties. And I know with science, the public health, Rick Metcalf from Neshoba, who comes to Board of Health all the time. At least every meeting, there's a septic permit being put in. And there are properties that have to get creative on they want to move things around. They've added swimming pools. They've got to try to sneak in a septic repair or an expansion, and they make it happen. There's technology now to really take care of that. And I know, Laura, you just briefly mentioned that I'll call it snob zoning for what it really is, that years ago, statewide, not just Townsend, I'm not attacking just Townsend, but Townsend freaked out when Timberlake came in. But statewide in that same time period, snob zoning took over Massachusetts and probably other states as well. And they came up with these stories and myths that you needed all these huge properties for septic, for water, for schools. And there was a real weird formula that somebody came up with, that every time you build a house, you got to hire a cop and build a school. And it's proven to be quite the opposite. So smaller lots help. It helps provide affordable housing. In particular, if you're trying to build affordable senior housing, you need to have the prices lower. Land costs too much money. You need to have a smaller lot that can fit everything and that does get the approval of the other boards. Nobody's going to build anything in town, regardless of house size, how big the lot is, if the Board of Health hasn't approved it, if conservation hasn't approved it, if the building inspector, and if you guys or ZBA if needed. There's so many protections for reducing our zoning, our building lot size. that, I mean, I think it's a great thing, and I think we should do it townwide, not just on a jurisdiction. And that's all I have. Thank you.
I agree with you, Cindy, and thank you for your support, your comments.
Can I comment on that, Cindy? I agree there's a need for housing. I agree there's a demand for smaller lots. But I also agree in some of the beauty of having diversified zoning. If you have it all uniform zoning, it is nothing more than a boring suburbia. If you take Townsend, for example, there is a very distinct feeling of the villages that we have, which have higher densities and the charm that exists there. So you go through the woods and all of a sudden there's a concentration of buildings and you arrive at a village. That is a sense of arrival, that has an emotional reaction to. Then there are other people in our community that are into farming, other people in our community that are into horses. So to have a zoning prototype for a disparity of people, I think is a wise approach, rather than your statement that the entire town should be 1 acre zoning or half acre zoning. I don't think the people in Townsend would find that particularly attractive or eventful. You know, one of the beauties that we have as a society is we have the choice to live in an urban center, a suburban center, and a rural center. So people decide where they want to live based on the lifestyle they are looking for. I think it's in the interest of Townsend to preserve as many of those options as possible without focusing on one specific type. And so in this situation with the age-restricted development, people have to be aware that we're giving a developer relief from zoning to provide specific housing for a specific group of people. In other words, that's not what we had planned for this town, but because we want something for this group of people, we are making an accommodation. And that was the intent of that bylaw when it was created, and that was the purpose for it. And that is why it's exclusively for that use. So I'm trying to not only be on the planning board in terms of what's happening today and what's happening in the future, I'm trying to protect interest of as many citizens as we can. And so you know, and you're absolutely right. You know, village type settings on quarter acres has been something we grew up with, and we really haven't had much trouble with them. Again, as our chairman has said, those things are controlled by other departments, and those standards have to be met by the other departments, no matter what part of town you're doing it. And
or
so,
how big your lot is.
Pardon me?
Or how big your lot is.
Or how big your lot is, yes. It's the same thing. If you're in the village zoning right now, let's say you're in right in the center of town, and you have a 1,200 square foot home there. We just passed, or we're just doing an ADU ordinance that says you can have another dwelling unit, but there are standards on that. It can't be over 900 square feet, and it can't be more than 50% of the existing structure. So if you have a 1,200 square foot home now, you'll only be able to build a 600 square foot unit. So that's what this is all about. And so, yes, if you have an AD unit in a area that's zoned for 2 acres per unit, then you might be able to build the optimum 900 square foot ADU unit. Whereas if you were in the village and you had a smaller home existing, you wouldn't have that. You couldn't make the AD unit more than 50% of the size of the current one you have.
Hey, Robert, I don't want to cut you off. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
I have one quick comment.
Sure.
Quick.
Okay, I agree with you as far as like diversity type of housing, because if someone wanted to live in a city-like atmosphere, there are plenty of cities to choose from, and Townsend isn't the place to be if you want to make it so tight with buildings on every square inch. I do agree there's a place for a certain type of housing, and a lot of us would live in a city if we wanted to have a neighbor, you open up the window, you can see into the person's unit, you know? My sister and her husband live on a farm. You know, you're right, there's all different types of dwellings.
All right, so to get back on track.
Are we voting this?
I believe we
I
are.
have to close the public hearing, and then we have 2 other things we still have to go through.
All right.
For our annual town meeting. Is there a motion to, there's nobody else online that wants to talk, right? Is there a motion for us to close this public hearing at 8:12 PM?
So moved.
And I'll second it. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we're 3.1. Any edits to the draft zoning bylaw amendments and finalized text of the amendments? We need to have a vote on that.
Are there edits, it seems?
I just got a couple from town council, and they would be, they're on the chapter 40, section 5. I think this is the second page because I don't have this. Do you guys have this? One draft?
The draft, yeah.
Draft of what? For planning board report at the annual town meeting. Oh,
No.
I don't think I saw that.
It's at the bottom.
Oh, is it at the bottom of the pile? I have an extra one here.
It might be, I think it would be.
They all look similar. They're all-
Yeah.
No, I brought most of this with
Oh, yeah.
me.
Oh, okay. If you each have one, I will just go through. The first one, there is no change. The second page, which is,
The first one was for the actual adoption of the floodplain overlay district text, the 5 or 6 pages we looked at. That
Okay,
is prescribed by the federal government.
First one's floodplain. Okay.
Second one is just the map.
That's the map.
Floodplain
Right.
map, correct, just adding it as an attachment.
Okay, and the cross out is add to the zoning and cross out chapter in the appropriate bylaw, or just say zoning bylaw.
Just say bylaw, correct. Beth wasn't sure what we were gonna be referencing, so that's why she
Okay.
has that highlighted, but I think you can just replace it by a reference to
Zoning
adding that to the
bylaw.
bylaw.
okay. So that
And
would be it.
that's the July 8th, 2025.
Okay,
And then the last one is on the age restricted. And down to number 2, it's section C8.
okay.
Number 3, it's subsection C5.
Okay.
And then still in 3, last section 8, it's C8. So
Okay.
that's gonna make those
Changes,
changes.
okay.
And then I will just entertain a motion that you approve the verbiage for the annual town meeting on the 3
Approved as, motion to approve as amended?
for the reports.
As
Yes.
based on this draft.
Yes,
I
and the
agree.
edits that council just did. Okay,
I'll second.
second, first. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we just approved with the edits. Everything.
The drafts that we just saw.
With those edits.
So we already did the, all of the, oh, did you have any more left?
Slightly, yes.
Okay.
One more.
So we're done with 3.1 and 3.2, thank you, God. And now, Andrew's gonna finish something in the
Correspondence.
3.3.
Finishing the correspondence, so there's a public info and input session. This is an enhanced outreach and engagement for the Townsend Open Space and Recreation Plan.
Oh my God.
Wednesday, May 7th.
What is that for again?
The Townsend Open Space and Recreation Plan draft update. So it's Wednesday, May 7th at 12:30 p.m. at the Townsend Senior Center.
May 7th at the Townsend Senior Center.
At 12:30 p.m.
May 7th, should be there.
So what are they doing?
It's an enhanced outreach and engagement for the Townsend Open
Just shoot me
Space.
now on that. I think I want to shoot a budget.
Open space?
Yes.
We'll send you as the ambassador.
And I believe to attend the senior luncheon, you must register 24 hours in advance, but you can still attend the presentation if you do not attend the lunch. The pre-registered lunch is at 12 p.m. and the presentation is at 12:30.
Thank you for that.
Yep, let's see. Then there is also a questionnaire for aging adults in Townsend, which could be found somewhere.
What's considered aging?
You know where that would be publicly available, that questionnaire?
It's up on the website.
On the
now.
website.
So there's a link there on the flyer.
Okay.
It's a long link, but yeah.
Got it. All right, perfect. This is a notice from the town of Pepperell, their planning board. This is for a public hearing that will be on April 29th at 6:30 p.m. to consider proposed amendments to the Pepperell zoning bylaw for the floodplain overlay district. This is also from the town of Pepperell. This is a notice of decision. This is hereby given that the zoning board of appeals special permit has been granted to a Matthew Steele. Special permit to allow a change of a non-conforming use to convert the existing single-family dwelling into a two-family dwelling. The subject property is located in the industrial zoning district at 1A Chapel Place in Pepperell, shown on tax map 23, parcel 106-0. And the last one here is from the town of Shirley. Zoning Board of Appeals is a legal advertisement for a public hearing at 7 p.m. on Monday, May 5th, 2025 at the town office to discuss an application submitted by Parker Village LLC, courtesy of Melissa Robbins, Farrell and Robbins, PC 270 Littleton Road, Suite 32, Westford. The application for a comprehensive permit containing a 48-unit development with 12 units restricted as affordable. The project will be located on land at 58 Parker Road, 0 Grade Road, and 242 Grade Road. Property is located in their R1 district.
What was the total units?
48 unit development
48 and
with
12?
12 restricted as affordable.
Oh, okay. I missed the 48 part.
Okay, it was in there.
All right, thank you. It's not in there?
It doesn't say 40B.
It says comprehensive permit.
Oh. I just want to say, Robert, in reference to what, you were saying about the community living and multi-level buildings and stuff like that. Okay, because recently what we have just done basically are townhouse units and smaller developments. So the buildings, the last ones that we have done in town, and one of them was before my time, was Atwood Acres. And that was, 50 units, 3 levels, it is our affordable housing, is still an affordable housing number count. And those were not age restricted, those were low income.
Mhm.
So you could be a veteran, you could be somebody who's handicapped. That building accommodated that.
Mhm.
They had a common area within the building, and they also had outdoor space. So next building was Townsend Woods. That was age restricted, 36 units, 3 levels, elevators, indoor common areas, as well as outdoor. Like they could garden if they wanted, and there's a picnic table. So those things get addressed in those types of buildings. If we want to look at Country Estates, which is 82 units, 3 buildings, 3 levels, those were built in 60, 69, 70, and 71, no elevators. But they have lots of common space. And, you know, they got a pool, they got a tennis court, they've got, you can bike around there, and there's 11 acres, and they could walk to and fish.
Well,
And you have Pine Ridge,
Mhm.
that were 5 buildings,
Right.
120 units,
Right.
3 levels, no elevators.
But
built around
none
the same
of
time.
those in our bylaw, everything that you've mentioned was proposed by the developer, okay? It wasn't controlled by the town.
Yeah, before my time. I don't know. I'm just telling you what we have.
Right. So, for example,
And one thing I wanted to mention, Country Estates had balconies.
Yeah.
They became a danger. They all had to be removed, like 20-something years ago.
that's a maintenance issue, okay? I'm what I'm trying to tell people in my peer group, that there's always trade-offs in any project, depending on the parameters of the project and the goals. But there are also some common concerns that go beyond just what the town needs and just what the developer needs, okay? We have to concern ourselves with the occupants in these buildings, okay? So we have a history, a social history of building projects that have failed and evaluated why, okay? So in a multifamily complex of any significant magnitude, you have a variety of cultures existing in a common building. So there are cultural classes that exist already. Then when you have them in a concentrated area without any direct outdoor breathing space, I want to call it, the opportunity for confrontation within the building escalates.
But
right.
so
what the whole purpose of this, as far as a Townsend bylaw, zoning bylaw, is whatever residents that we acquire in this town, we want them to be happy while they're here. And so again,
would that be like, and I probably don't know have the right words. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, but are we looking for some kind of mental health bylaw?
I also introduced last fall the term wellness and design, okay?
Yeah.
Without defining it. In other words, making the responsibility when we have a approval for a project to concern ourselves with the wellness of the people in there, okay? So wellness can have a very broad basis, and it can also have a very focused one. So in that world is why I am encouraging that multifamily buildings, whether they're on the ground or many levels high, we haven't had any high-rise buildings per se, but the potential could be that we would. And to have a direct outdoor space of a minimum of 80 square feet, which is not enormous, but a buffer zone that you can use as an extension of your dwelling unit that is outdoors. with fresh air, with a toddler that can ride a trike around just a small area and be protected, okay? So when you take a 4-year-old child and you put them in a box amongst a bunch of other boxes, that is not wellness, okay?
Okay, I think you've made your point, and I understand what you're saying, and.
So my
Perhaps there will come a
my
time.
point as a board, we're making exceptions for developers to encourage these particular building types. We're letting them have relief from regular zoning bylaws. So in turn, we're asking them to provide these things when they submit their applications. And that's what I feel. And like I said, in the last 2 age restricted ones that we happened to look at, the Depot Street, the outdoor space for meeting was a picnic table.
That was also on the rail trail.
Huh?
That one's on the rail trail. I mean, that is a very recreational. There's a huge, there's a picnic table there. There's
huge.
Well, that was an insult to me, okay? It was an
Why?
insult, a picnic table, okay?
Oh.
Then the other one on
But
Fitchburg
not
Road,
everybody gets the rail trail.
on Fitchburg Road, the dumpster is located at the extreme edge of the lot, okay?
We had our.
All right, we approved those, but we learned from them, okay?
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is this, as a board, when we look at these things, we have more topics to look at, okay? More topics to look at. Not that one is better than the other, but not just what the developer needs and the physical limitations of a drawing, okay? That's all, I'm sorry.
So I'm
Motion to adjourn.
going to say thank you very much.
And I'll second that.
And I will accept the motion to adjourn at 8:28.
This is the after.